In this video, I'm going to talk about grafting and the Voynich Manuscript. For people who have never heard of the Voynich Manuscript, just know for now that it is an old book that was carbon dated to the early 15th century. It contains illustrations on various topics, including grafting. Well, actually, experts who have studied the book are still not sure what it is about. The book is written with an unknown alphabet that has evaded all attempts at cracking its mysteries. The best human minds and code breakers, including Alan Turing, have tried to decipher the book with no success. Historians, mathematicians, and cryptography enthusiasts across the globe are still trying every day with the latest computer science and AI technologies, but so far the Voynich Manuscript has remained a complete mystery. In the first part of this video, I will talk about grafting, and if you are up for it, I will take you on a tangent in the second part more focused on the Voynich Manuscript. This could be of interest to the curious gardeners and the Voynich Manuscript fans alike. To the non-gardeners readers of the Voynich Manuscript, the plants depicted do not make sense. Botanists often quickly recognize that many of the plants in there are chimeras, or combinations of different plants. But botanists are not gardeners, so even them will deem the chimeras of the manuscript impossible. To be fair, most gardeners would probably agree with the botanists. I think there are three main reasons for this. First, look at the different ways the plants are spliced together. Here, the stems seem to be spliced together from the roots to the first leaves. There is also the stem and branch splicing at specific junction points. Here the roots seem to be spliced together multiple times. And let's not forget plugging cuttings directly into big roots and bulbs. All these crazy splicing techniques make these ones look almost normal. The second reason is that the drawing is pretty bad, and the painting is even worse, borderline sloppy. For example, this plant looks like an oak tree, but you really need to make an effort to recognize the shape of the leaves and the nuts. Finally, the third reason, in my opinion, is that when the drawing and splicing are not too crazy, the overall plant does not make sense. Most people will probably recognize this as a water lily, thanks to the big round leaf with a cut section. But the flower is clearly not that of a water lily. Notice that the root system on the left is different from the one on the right, as if the two root systems have been spliced together. Are the combinations of plants possible, or are they pure fantasies? Today, most fruit trees sold in nurseries are grafted trees. Modern grafting techniques have been selected and perfected over many years, often with the end goal of maximizing yields and profits, which resulted in a relatively limited knowledge base. Most botanists or nursery technicians, for example, have probably never spliced two different root systems together. And it could be easy to believe that grafting was invented by humans. In fact, grafting happens all the time in nature. Scientists even gave nature's grafting process a name: Inosculation. Essentially, inosculation happens when two plants, trees for example, grow very close to each other. With close proximity, their branches, trunks, and even roots can fuse together. In the Western world, Romans have been known to practice artificial inosculation many centuries ago, notably in the Umbria region of Italy. This allowed them to obtain bigger and better tasting fruits and bigger trees as well. They call this practice the wedding of plants. In ancient Egypt, inosculation and other grafting techniques were used to obtain woods of different colors that were used for sarcophagi and other sacred artifacts. In his 1806 book, Du rapprochement des végétaux, de Caylus wrote that in the 7 years that he spent in Egypt, he never was able to find the trees that produced those colored woods. He did, however, find the colored woods in the stalks of some of the rifles of an Arab tribe. They told him that the woods came from a very distant past. They also told him that the inhabitants of Memphis, the main city of ancient Egypt, were known to practice the lost culture techniques that produced the color woods. But the Chinese probably were, and maybe still are, the champions when it comes to grafting. In his 1925 book, French botanist Lucien Daniel wrote that sacred ancient Chinese texts dated more than 8,000 years ago already mentioned grafting. Is there any truth to this? Well, this paper, published in 2006 by a Chinese team, indicates that grafting techniques were already applied in production before the Han Dynasty that started in 206 BC. The important word here is before. The Chinese knowledge about grafting was most probably deeper than that of the Romans and other Western civilizations. After the collapse of the Roman Empire during the Dark Ages, grafting knowledge was essentially lost in the West for 1,000 years. It was the French who brought back this ancient knowledge to Western civilizations at the end of the Middle Age, with their crusades in the East and the support of the Knights Templar. Having seen that inosculation and grafting can actually happen anywhere on the plant, including in the root systems, the next question is whether two unrelated plants can be grafted. Again, the Chinese already knew about the limitations of grafting unrelated plants thousands of years ago. Not only did they know about the limitations, they also studied the factors involved in grafting unrelated plants. In his 1883 book, French botanist Eugène Fournier wrote that the Chinese used techniques unknown to Western gardeners, and that they had a very bold approach to grafting that would make any Western botanist doubt their own beliefs. He gave examples of them successfully grafting chrysanthemum on wormwood, oak on chestnut, grapes on jujube, and peach on persimmon. I dare you find any of these combinations in present-day nurseries. Since then, it has been accepted by science that grafting unrelated plant species can induce production of new compounds in both the xylem and the rootstock. More generally, grafting can alter gene expression patterns in plants. With this in mind, it seems possible that grafting the roots of a water lily with the roots of another plant can produce a different flower. To this point, this plant looks very much like a hemp plant. Notice how the lower leaves of this grafted plant all have different numbers of fingers, 7, 8, and 9, while the higher leaves all have the same number of fingers, 8. These variations are sometimes observed in non-grafted plants, and it is currently believed that the variations are due to natural or stress-related alterations in gene expression. In 1778, French Jesuit priest Pierre Martial Cibot dedicated a whole chapter of his third book on the history, arts, and science of the Chinese to a strange fruit they obtained by grafting queen science on orange trees. The fruit was the size of a small melon with characteristics from both plant species. Beyond the Chinese mastery of the art of plant grafting, this shows that the chimeras depicted in the Voynich Manuscript may not be that fictional. Finally, the expert eyes of hobbyist gardeners may find that the graft points on many plants in the Voynich Manuscript do not match present-day grafting standards, as grafting tape has become so prevalent today. But considering that grafting tape was invented in the 20th century, it is not unreasonable to think that the graft points in the manuscript use something else to seal the wound and maintain moisture, something like a natural wax, for example. Actually, the illustrator seems to have put some special attention to the graft unions on these two plants. I'm going to shift gears now. Stick around if you are curious about the other parts of the Voynich Manuscript. If not, click on the like and subscribe buttons if you learned something new. If you did not learn anything new and still want to stick around, just remember to click on the like and subscribe buttons when you feel what I'm saying no longer makes any sense. Does it make sense? Strangely enough, an obvious clue in the astrological section has often been overlooked by many researchers. It is quite clear that the months in the middle of the concentric circles are written with the Roman alphabet. We can read Mars for March, Abril or Aberil for April, Octobre for October, and so on. The best language matching these words is Occitan, as some researchers have already suggested. Maybe the months of June, July, and August are the most confusing, but it seems probable that what is written is JUHN for June, JULHET for July, and AUGST for August. Keep in mind that the manuscript was carbon dated to the early 15th century. Medieval Occitan was not as standardized as modern Occitan, so there were multiple ways to write the same word. From this, it can be inferred that the manuscript probably originates from either southern France or northern Italy. In the astronomical section, the V-shaped battlements of this castle look very much like those of the castles in northern Italy, like the Venice Castle or the Simeone Castle, for example. Back to the astrological section, 2 months seem to be missing, the months of January and February. Also, since this clearly appears to be a zodiac calendar, it should start with the spring equinox and the month of March, which is the case here. But there seems to be a mismatch with the Pisces symbol, as the astrological year should start with Aries. Another puzzling symbol is Scorpio with 4 legs instead of 8, and a strange tail. It can be inferred that the astrological section is based on either sidereal astrology instead of tropical astrology, or even more outrageous, on 13 constellations instead of 12, also known as true sidereal astrology. The additional constellation is Ophiuchus, often depicted as a figure holding a serpent. On this depiction, the serpent bearer stands on a scorpion. The Scorpio sign with a snake-like tail in the Voynich Manuscript is actually Ophiuchus, or a combination of Scorpio and Ophiuchus. The dates for each sign in sidereal and true sidereal zodiac calendars are as follows. Now, all the zodiacal signs in the Voynich Manuscript match their respective beginning months, with Pisces starting the zodiacal year at the spring equinox in March. It should be noted that the Ophiuchus constellation was part of the zodiac of ancient Egypt, as can be seen here on this bas-relief, known as the Dendera zodiac. Ophiuchus sits between Scorpio and Sagittarius. In traditional Indian astrology, the signs are sidereal as well. The Indian influence on Islamic astrologers was carried from Muslim Spain into the southern Christian lands of medieval Europe. Taking into account the Occitan language with the sidereal and possibly true sidereal zodiac, one origin seems most probable for the Voynich Manuscript, the Cathars. Cathars were followers of a Christian Gnostic movement known as Catharism that was very quickly expanding in southern Europe, particularly in southern France in the 12th century. The Roman Catholic Church eventually decided to label this dissident movement as heretic and launched a series of crusades against them. By the early 14th century, the Cathars were practically wiped out, often burnt alive at the stake by the hundreds. Some of them managed to flee to Lombardy in northern Italy, but they were eventually also hunted down by the inquisitors. Are there any other clues in the Voynich Manuscript that can support the hypothesis that the book is effectively related to the Cathar movement? First and foremost, women had a much more important role in the Cathar society. At a time when access to Roman Catholic priesthood was very limited to women, Catharism was welcoming them, which progressively contributed to strengthening their participation in the Cathar society. With regards to all matters related to spirituality, Cathar women were almost equal to men, which in and of itself was considered very subversive by the Roman Catholic Church. The vast majority of human characters in the Voynich Manuscript are women, as seen in the astrological section, but this is also the case in the balneological section. Small organized communities of women were not uncommon in the Cathar society. This aspect is depicted by the groups of women bathing together. However, the balneology interpretation of this section by the Voynich Manuscript research community is not accurate. It should be mentioned here that Catharism rejected water baptism. Rather, this section depicts a fundamental aspect of the Cathar faith, the transmigration of souls after death. This principle is represented by the flow of water, with the ponds representing temporary resting places for the souls before reincarnation. Yes, Cathars were Christians who believed in reincarnation. They were against killing animals, as according to the faith, souls can reincarnate in animals. Cathars were vegetarians. They also practiced water fasting. This may help explain the choice of the flow of water to represent the transmigration of souls. Some writers and historians went as far as labeling them the Western Buddhists. Actually, Cathars believe souls can also be trapped in plants, a belief that is depicted with some of the plants of the Voynich Manuscript. Cathars being Christians, it could be puzzling to notice that the sign of the cross is nowhere to be found in the Voynich Manuscript, except on this page of the Soul Transmigration section. Below this woman holding a cross, another woman is depicted holding a ring, a symbol of marriage. Notice how both characters hold the cross and the ring away from them. This illustrates another important aspect of the Cathar faith. All things of the material world were created by the damage of the Old Testament to imprison the souls. Needless to say, Cathars rejected the Old Testament. According to them, the cross was an instrument of torture, while marriage further anchored the soul in the material realm and the cycle of reincarnations. As this soul reaches the plane at the bottom of the page, it prepares to reincarnate in a different form, as depicted by animals in or coming to the plane. The depiction of the soul standing out of a fish symbolizes the impossibility for the soul to incarnate in a fish, the only animal Cathars are permitted to eat in their vegetarian diet, as fishes were believed to be soulless. A paper published in 2022 by Fletcher Crow, a retired university professor, has claimed to have successfully found the keys to decode the Voynich manuscript and even proposed full translation of some of the pages. This paper is quite interesting as it affirms the text translated, regardless of the section, deals exclusively with the Cathars and their faith. In particular, translation of the text in the botanical section deals exclusively with the Cathar faith, with no connection whatsoever to the plants depicted. If the translation proves to be correct, some Voynich manuscript researchers might fear that this could mark the end of their quest. But actually, what this would mean is that the translation of the text will be of little help to figure out the mystery behind the strange plants depicted in a book that probably was crafted in northern Italy, the final refuge of the last Cathars, 100 years or more after their faith was extinguished by the Inquisition. And although Cathars and Knights Templar were contemporary, thrived in the same southern region of France, and eventually met the same fate at the stake, little is known about their hypothetical affinity. Could the Voynich manuscript help shed some light on this seemingly inevitable affinity? What is certain is that not many Cathar books survived the Inquisition, which makes the Voynich manuscript even more invaluable. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.